It's my pleasure to introduce you to Megha Mawandia, our next Wonder Woman, who is a family therapist, social worker, and founder of Triyoke, Raising Parents. Welcome, Megha.
Thank you. Thank you, Mandeep. Really excited to be here with Wonder Woman.
Let me tell our members that, like most of you, Megha also came from the corporate world and was a marketing and brand design person for 10 years, a professional. And then she moved on into this practice. And she went on to TIS to do her master's in social work regarding child's rights and everything else that we'll hear from her directly. I wanted to tell you that Megha is very passionate about helping people explore their role as parents and encourages spouses to better support each other in their parenting. Whatever I have read on your website, Megha, sounds very interesting. And I must tell you that WiP has been looking for a parenting expert for a while. And we are very glad to host you today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Okay, so my first question is going to be what I usually start with. That tell me about your journey and how did you get into this line of work?
Okay. That's one of my favorite questions because I don't believe people get into this work for the money. They get into it because of the experiences they've had, and mine has been somewhat that kind of a journey. I was very well settled and blissful in my world of design, marketing, etc. And then I had my child with special needs. And in the journey of bringing support for her, I realized how less we were supported as parents. There was a lot of support available to get her on track, but the ability to get her on track was dependent on how I was feeling at each moment. For me to take strong decisions, for me to break molds, to move along and do what needed to be done for her, a lot of the effort actually needed to be put into my own mental health and the strengthening of that. And I found there to be a dearth of that kind of support in India, particularly for women, but men too. I think my husband would attest to the same, that he had no places. There's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of expectation that you should, but there's no how can you do it and how do I overcome my emotional hurdles to do it. So I decided I'm going to do this. And I went back to study, and my entire focus was on supporting parents because that is, you're nurturing the garden that feeds the city, the farm.
Megha, one of the fascinating part about the whole work that you are doing is this bit about teaching parents how to balance, because we had a very polarized thing. Some of the people follow a lot of Western tools into how to now bring up your children, and others are still. We also want our values, Indian values there, and I saw that you work with that. Tell us something about that.
Yes. See, there's a lot of whitewashing of mental health and family practices, etc., that I have been noticing, and colleagues I work with and I respect have been noticing in the non-white worlds. So whether if we look at cultures of India, of Asian countries, even and Israel, because I have colleagues in these countries, and Italy sometimes, China, and we realized, and UAE, we realized when we were talking to each other that we do not, our family systems do not operate like that. Individuals do not build their strength from being alone, from being successful. In fact, success in our systems looks like being integrated into the family, being part of the family. And I remember when I was doing that journey with my daughter, and I was a typical Indian household where children didn't sit on high chairs back then, and they sat either on the floor and they ate, or they sat on the table with some cushions put on it. We didn't really have these things called high chairs. I mean, you got it at restaurants when you went there. You might have been affluent and bought one from Mother Care, but you didn't know how to use them.
Usually the cushions worked, I remember.
Exactly. And नहीं तो गोदी पे बैठा के खिलाते थे. Right? Now, here I was learning therapy, and most of it was centered around a high chair, and most of it was centered around cooking. And I didn't cook, I had staff who used to cook for me. So I had to convert all these systems that were created for a Western household into what would it look like in a joint Indian family household. And I felt that was really unfair for me as a parent to have to do, because I had to interpret it. It was like you're learning something in Mandarin and converting it into English, and you don't know Mandarin, and you don't have this, you're not a converter, you're not a linguist, and you're already emotionally at a very stressed state.
Sure.
So I decided to use the benefit. Why is the Western voice so loud? Because they put in a lot of money, a lot of effort and time to study, to document, to put out papers. So I decided that, well, we don't have that infrastructure, but that doesn't mean we don't have know-how and knowledge. So using that information, and because now my practice has been built over 7 years, using the on-ground knowledge of people like me and other therapists in these regions, we've created these sort of alternate discussions about what does it look like in our context, in our communities.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it looks different. It doesn't look the same because our values are different, and we need our values to shine through, because those values aren't seeped in what you're thinking in your generation. It's what you've also brought down from all the generations before you. And then you get to choose, of course, what you want to keep and what you want to let go of. But the empowerment is when you're getting to choose, not when you're being judged that you have to let go of that and you have to borrow something else, because then we have this fracture in a string of knowledge which I can own.
Wonderfully said. Wonderfully said. I think you very nicely said those values have to shine through. And I think in our own ways, some of our families, we all try to do that. But I think if someone like you is helping parents, it goes a long way. One of the things which all parents think that whatever they are doing is the best for their children. That's a thing that you hear all the time. But I thought my intention was best. I would always do something that is best to you, to support your dreams, your hopes, and whatever the children want to do. So, what are the signs that the family would require to have to see that they require the services of a therapist?
Absolutely. So, first of all, you're absolutely right. Parents are trying their best to do the best they can to provide for their children. However, as happens with all best laid intentions, things don't always turn out the way they might have envisaged. When we are in this parenting journey, it's very important to always keep in mind that I am only providing a context. I am only providing the food on the table. End of the day, what my child decides to do with it is part of their journey, just as it has been between our parents and us. There is a context, there is situations that might crop up, there is the child's own situations that they're going to have to learn to navigate. And if we're going to try to protect them from their struggles, their journeys, we're actually going to do them a disservice, because then we're stunting their growth, because each challenge is really an opportunity to grow and do better. So I feel a lot of parents struggle with this idea of perfection, where they when they start getting very caught up in outcome, that I'm a good parent if my child goes to this school, I'm a good parent if my child gets these grades, I'm a good parent if my child lands the right job, etc., etc., if my child is polite, if people are talking well about my child. And the moment we start seeing a lot of this I coming up, if people can do that reflection and see, why is this about me? And why am I not able to take a step back and let it be about my child? Because that is their show. My show is my life, which is not just my role as a parent, it's everything else that I do. So, the first sign I would say is when you start getting too enmeshed or too caught up or too invested in the outcomes of what is going on in your child's life. The second sign I would say is if your child starts asking you, because teens and preteens, so I am seeing children. So my practice, my youngest client would be about 8 years old, and my oldest is about 82 years old. So there's this wide arc, right, as a family therapist, of people that I have the privilege to see, and I have the absolute privilege to be their sounding board where they're sharing such intimate personal stories of their lives. And through this, what I see repeatedly is the younger they are, they're so quick to accept this because it it really gives them a lot of empowerment, and they have no stigmas around it. Zero. Zero. The stigmas really only come from the family context. I am currently seeing this teen who's 14, and the mother comes with this teen and sits outside my clinic every time she comes. And the mother first interviewed me before the teen started working with me, saying that nobody in our family has ever done this. She has been pestering me for over a year that she needs to do this for herself, and I'm only doing this because she has asked, and I'm very nervous, and I hope you don't mind if I'm sitting outside. I mean, I've told her my privacy doesn't allow me to share what the child is talking to the mother, but the concern is only coming from the mother. Now, this teen is sitting in front of me, questioning me on my ideologies, questioning me on my therapeutic practices, asking me, what does this mean? What does that mean? Is coming up to me and talking to me about ethics of counseling sessions. She has done her homework to
Yes,
a level that I don't think the mother can even engage with.
that's true. That's true.
So, what I'm trying to say is that allow your kid, if they're bringing it up, to know what they're talking about, and just allow that conversation instead of shutting it down to take it into a session. And finally, a sign that I would say one should consider therapy is if they start feeling like either they're in a gridlock in any situation, whether it is with their child, whether it is with their spouse, or whether it is with their parents. We have in India something which is very common, which is family separations, which is not divorce, but it is as bad as divorce.
Yes.
And what we don't realize is how much it affects the psyche of a child. When there has been grief or loss or any big emotion, we keep thinking that, oh, my child is not affected. This is just money problems. How is it mattering to my child? But they are getting affected. They are. So, the thing I'm asking you to do as adults is to reflect what are the difficult moments in your life, and invariably what will come up for you is every time you saw your parents struggling along with your own struggles, but when you saw your parents struggling, no matter how old you were, it was a difficult period in your life. And the moment you notice you're in such a situation, please acknowledge this is going to be hard for the entire family system.
Sure.
So getting some help is not going to do any harm.
Very well said. I think I picked up a few things from this one, which I'm going to ask you further. One is that when parents are in denial, in the sense, or one of the spouses is whosoever has custody of the kids and feels that, no, I think they're doing perfect. I've ensured that, and they don't need to talk to anyone. That's one. And the two is the first part of your thing, where people actually, once they're doing well or they think the family is all well, try to fix the fact that the kids don't have to go through the struggle. Like you said, it's so much part of the growth. But increasingly, in fact, one of the first things that I found when I started working was as if we were running a PTA because that was a time when the millennials were just coming of age and they were coming to work, and the parents would call and saying, she's not well. So I said, who do you think? I mean, they can call up, they're not that sick. They was to try to fix everything for their children. And I see that in our friends, our generation of parents who are well provided for and they're educated. So they just feel like, no, you don't have to do this. Tell the HR, tell the lawyer, tell the thing, because they're so informed. They don't let the children navigate on their own. So we're trying to, perhaps overcompensate in a way for things perhaps we didn't have or our parents didn't have. So these two things, I want your comment on it. One is denial, and the second one is trying to overcompensate.
Absolutely. I love the topics that you're bringing up because
You
they're
were
so
saying one
rich for
thing.
discussion. No, but you're picking up on the right ones.
Yeah,
So let's talk about the requirement or the desire we have to make sure our children lead perfect lives, right? And actually, we're talking about this from the impact of colonization in our society, and the way our generations have been dealing with the external situations they've been in. So typically, if you are a parent today in your 30s or 40s, you have had a grandparent who has been through that period when the country went through its independence and the struggles, etc. What did that mean for a family? It meant that there was a lot of difficulty in terms of political uncertainty, in terms of economic uncertainty. Also, with partition, with families being torn apart, there was a lot of struggle. So, that is a generation that was solely focused on putting food on the table, on making sure things felt secure, and on making sure that they survived. It was survival at the basis layer. Now, I'm not talking about the elite families who were able to flourish, and we're talking about the general population, the stories that I'm seeing also play out today,
Sure.
where I had a client who said, my grandmother used to take still till she passed used to take pride in sleeping on the dining table, even though they lived in a house with multiple rooms and a lot of affluence, because the next generation had really made its mark. The grandmother was still symbolic of having been through partition, of having been the person who had struggled, who had done all of this. And what she talked about was how seeing that was a constant reminder of the strength of women in her family and how we cannot take money for granted. So I want you to realize there was a struggle which was two generations down, but yet it was being internalized by the grandchild as we cannot ever take money for
Granted.
granted.
Yes.
Because here's what happens then in the second generation. The second generation looks at the struggles of their parents and now wants to start to capitalize on the opportunities of having survived, having had some sort of an education. The liberalization of the economy had started in the 90s. They are now in a position to bring their family into a better financial stature, where we're trying to move away from putting food on the table to upgrading our quality of life, right? So now here, their entire focus was that to be a workhorse. Put your head down, work hard, make sure you're providing for everybody to upgrade their life. So it wasn't so much of survival, but it was more about let's do better, let's make the most out of opportunities. Now, that is the context of the parents that these individuals today are parenting. So, generation three, right? Who've taken advantage of their parents working hard, who've seen their grandparents sacrificing. But today, money is coming much easier. Money is coming, I'm not saying it's easy at all, but if I'm going to look at it as a comparative, you can you can survive, you can thrive on what is available, but your aspirations have gone even higher. As it happens with every paycheck, you think, every pay rise, you think all my problems are over, and then you want better. That's the human psychology, right? So now this generation is whose parenting has really high aspirations, and they want to make sure that their children get everything on the platter. Why? Because they have the access to social media, they have the access to international
Yes.
systems of what is going on. So now they aren't comparing with their neighbor. They are not comparing with their cousin who's done really well. They're comparing with every person in every corner of the world that there ever was. And they're picking and choosing and creating this own hodgepodge of what they believe is what they want to give their children. Now, what is this group that's growing up doing is they're not recognizing that one has to work hard. They have lost context of that freedom struggle parent. They have lost context of that parent in the liberalized economy who's used to just working hard, getting stuff done. They are looking at their parents partying, their parents affluent lifestyles, their parents living a very consumer driven life, and getting fed the steady diet that work hard, party hard, work hard, party hard. And there is this misstep of very strong values that these parents who are working hard and partying hard have grown up in, and not realizing they're not taking the time to necessarily show up to their children, which are the quieter family dinners, which are everybody sitting together, everybody having some homogeneous rules in the house, saving, just being more in tuned with
Yeah.
oneself. We're in this continuous frenzy, and this pressure is being absorbed by these children very, very, very early. And this is really the context of these challenges evolving or devolving, because, well, the challenges are evolving and the systems we have known are devolving, because we just want to do it all and have it all, and it's not possible. I mean, even if you look at the feminist movement, when Sheryl Sandberg started talking about lean in, she said they had to give up, because after trying to do it all, they were like, we're not burning ourselves to the ground by doing it all. That's where we are right now, where people are starting to get burnt out, and the next generation is saying, we're not doing any of this. We're going to chill. We're going to Netflix and chill.
Oh, and a bit about people being in denial in terms of, the childhood wounds that they might be carrying themselves. And then we become parents. I feel that those are unresolved, unhealed anyway. And then you become a parent yourself. So when do these people come? Do they realize? I often wonder, do they come to you and say that, listen, I have so much baggage of my own, the way I was programmed as a child, or these are the childhood wounds I am carrying because my parents, grandparents did XYZ. Do such people turn up to your door?
So the inside joke is, when a client has done a couple of sessions, I'm like, right, that the parenting was only the guise to get you through the door. We're only working on you. Your child is fine. And they said, yes, we realize. Because, yes, you're right. There's been a lot of resistance to doing our own work, because we want to chin up and move on, and we want to man up and woman up and whatever not. कि
Yeah.
ये चीज़ें ज़रूरत नहीं होती है, there's no problem, everyone has done it, these should not be issues. But when it comes to their children, they want what's best, they want to do what's best, so they end up walking through the doors because of their children. But the work that I'm purely doing is helping them parent their inner child. This is the most essential work that we need to do, because the moment we allow ourselves to address those childhood wounds, those feelings, and it doesn't mean your parents did a bad job with you, it just means that you lived a life. Because the more we live, the more we fall, the more we struggle. What is a childhood wound? It's any time that you felt alone in a situation that you weren't equipped to deal with. And that could be big situations, that could be small situations, but they still need to be addressed. And the more open we are to addressing it, the more then we're not parenting from wounds, because we've addressed those wounds. It's like this: if I have hurt my knee and I'm still going to run, I'm always going to be hyper conscious of the pain in my knee, because it's very important for me to run. But if I have addressed the pain in my knee and it's not hurting me anymore, now when I run, I have no pain. So now I'm going to be flying based on all my other faculties, which are connected with each other, instead of this unnecessary extra thorn, which is the pain in my knee. So these childhood wounds, if they're not addressed well and consistently, they become where we parent from, and that's when we lose the context of our child and their situation. Because if you're going to keep thinking that हमारे time में ये नहीं होता था, my answer to you is आपका time गया. वो वापस नहीं आ रहा है. Get over it. ये time पकड़ो. Let's look at what's going on for your child, and let's please not belittle their journey and their experience, because you cannot bring yourself to understand their situation. And here's the reality: every kid hates hearing that. Every kid hates hearing how their parent did this and that. They love hearing how their parent fell, how their parents struggled. As long as there's no lesson at the end of that story, they love hearing about it. Not because they like to know their parents are bad people, because they like to know their parents are human like they are. Because they are feeling continuously so much pressure to perform and to be perfect. Because it's not just your impressions of social media, it's also theirs, where every fault is highlighted with a magnifying glass. Right? It's like, right now, this Zoom session we're doing, this recording we're doing, it papers over our flaws. But now imagine if the same thing was in hyper magnifying focus, which all of our pores are visible we're not going to feel as comfortable to be able to have this conversation. So, the point is, this work, when people come through these doors and start to do, allow us to parent from a strength. And really, COVID has done a phenomenal job. I mean, it's done us so much disservice, but in the mental health space, it's done the most phenomenal job of opening people's minds to this in a way it has never opened before. You will see people in my profession talk about it across board that I've never seen so many men walk through my door. I've always had a practice where fathers were invested in coming, but now the number of them who are, and who are open to their vulnerabilities, who are open to exploring what their childhood traumas have been and looking to change the way they want to do it for their children. So
Fantastic. I think before we go on any further, I just wanted you to, I know you've already described it, but it'd be very nice that, you a whole lot of things are mentioned, and I'll give the link to your website about the kind of issues people approach you for. But I wanted to see that when you have to see the top three, four things of show, who are you talked about an 8-year-old and an 82-year-old. So that's what brings me to the fact that do children first bring parents more often, or is it the other way around? And two, which are the top two, three issues which people come to you for?
absolutely. So it's interesting, at each stage it looks different. So when parents are struggling with things like toilet training, fussy eating, child not paying attention, or school throwing up issues, they come to me themselves because they want to fix everything. This is that early stage of parenting where they have all this energy and they want to be perfect parents. So that's when it's the parenting challenges, or when there's a sibling that comes in. So there are two children. So the parents come in on their own accord when they're in that stage of children under 10 or 7, and there's aggression, there's all of that. Why is that an important stage for parents to come to us? Because we're not really addressing what they've come for. That's the starting point, and that's the easiest point. We're tracing it down to why, what is going on for you, how is this feeling for you, because this is practice run for the later stages.
Yeah.
Now come the preteens and teens. Here it is they who are getting themselves in. They are dragging their parents in. They are the ones who are coming up first. So I'm looking at kids who are about 12 and above, and many people ask me, is it the peer pressure that's bringing them? And I don't know where this story came from, but really it is the family systems that's bringing them. It's because they're struggling in their family, struggling, whether it is a family separation, whether it is parents having divorces or marital issues, whether it is financial issues, whether it is some grief that the family has been through. I mean, all of this is grief, or it is child sexual abuse. All of this is coming up and is the context to why they're coming. This becomes complicated in the peer relationships. This is actually what is creating the issues at the peer level. It's not the peer level that's creating the issues, it's the family issues which are creating challenges for the child, which is converting into peer level issues. Then we have the 20s who are coming. And these are people who've maybe gone abroad to study or are living outside the house. They're struggling because when they come back and they're trying to reconnect with their parents, there is this disconnect, and they're finding it very hard to get their parents to understand where they're coming from, what their value systems are, and uh, be respectful. See, here's the important thing: they want to be respectful, but they also want to be respected. And that's when the parents in the 20s are coming to me to work on those kind of areas, and so on and so forth. It goes on like that. The 80, the geriatrics, the senior citizens, so people who are 70 and above are coming because of the loss of relevance they're feeling in this world. This is particularly post COVID, right? Because it's, you've lived a full life, and you've been so relevant, and you've been on top of things, and you've made shit happen, and now all of that stuff doesn't matter anymore. It's like it's all gone to dust. Nobody wants my jewelry that I worked so hard to prepare, because they're like, jewelry isn't my security. I get fake stuff, which is so much cheaper, The land that I put together is now either my kid is forcing me to sell it, and or it's full of issues and it's not giving me the value I want. Whatever that identity I had is lost with it. And the family systems, what I've grown up with, that closeness, that community that I have felt in my childhood, is so far removed to what I'm seeing today, because it's an arc of 60, 70 years, right? That they're finding themselves extremely irrelevant. And that's a very scary feeling to be living with when you're watching your world fade. Right? So they're coming to me to work on that. In fact, their kids who are in their 40s and 50s are bringing them to me because they're like, we feel guilty. We want to be around our parent, but we can't because we have this going on. And our parent also doesn't want us to be around. But we want to make sure that they're doing better and that they're feeling better. So it's typically these NRI kids who are sending their parents who are in their 70s and 80s and helping them with support. So that's sort of
very well put, Megha. So I wish we had more time, but we will get you for a master class because there is so much to learn from you. Before we go, I want to ask you, how can parents boost good mental health in their children?
I love that question, and the answer is very simple: connection. So we keep thinking that parenting is about providing for them. If it was, you would see the richest families in India with very healthy parent-child relationships, and that is not the case. If it was about providing the child the best opportunities with the best education, then again, if it was such, you would see the most educated families in India with fantastic parent child relationships, and that is also not the case. The only thing that really matters in the parent child relationship, I'm not saying these other two aren't important, but if I have to pick, always pick connection. Always pick spending time with each other, listening to each other, supporting each other. This is not the same as giving in, spoiling, providing. This is all about listening, appreciating, and trusting. So that would be my one word: connection.
That's lovely. I hope you get time to do a whole lot of fun things with your girls because I know with the kind of number of people who are binging on your time these days, specifically post-COVID and during COVID, I think that's a thing that all working moms, we kind of have to balance. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, Megha, today. I'd like to tell our members that I know something that we all run away from is that we're going to become our parents one day. The only way we know how to communicate is usually what we learned as a child. And if we want to change something, people like Megha are there for us to go to and learn a better way to connect or stay connected with kids and not make the mistakes that we thought, usually happen in parents that we have known. A family finally is a place that you go back to when you want to feel loved and be there. And I think this was the perfect time to reset and pause and connect during the COVID time. I really thought that a lot of people connected with kids, which they had never had. So thank you, Megha, for showing us a lot of areas where we need to reflect on as to what we are doing right and what we are not doing right and setting that thing. Lovely having you today. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Megha Mawandia, and I am the founder of Triyoke Raising Parents. This is a baby that I have founded to be able to help parents, just like me, in their parenting challenges. Why? Because we wish there was a playbook to parenting, and there isn't. There's constantly turns that we're taking, and we're going blind in decisions that impact not only us, but our future generations. So you, who is building the next generation of this society, needs to be supported, and we're here to do that. Please connect with us via social media, via website, any which way that you feel convenient, and let's get started on better conversations on thriving families.